Imagine a boy whose childhood was spent not in games with peers, but in the shadow of the greatest man of the era. He saw what was hidden from prying eyes, knew secrets for which many would have given everything in the world, and kept his silence with the unwavering firmness of a granite cliff. He became a living archive, a witness to miracles, and a keeper of mysteries that define the course of history. This is the story of Anas ibn Malik, a boy who grew up to become the shadow of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and one of the greatest transmitters of his legacy. Chapter 1. A Mother's Gift. The dusty streets of Medina breathed with searing heat. The sun beat down mercilessly, making the air shimmer in a haze above the flat roofs of the mud-brick houses. On this day, the usual hum of the city was drowned out by the excited murmur of a crowd. An anticipation of change hung in the air. People flocked to one place, carrying the best of what they had in their hands. Every resident of Medina, whether man or woman, considered it their absolute duty to present a gift to the newly arrived prophet. Peace and blessings be upon him. The wealthy brought gold and silks. The poor gave their last savings or the fruits of their labor. Through this vibrant sea of humanity walked a woman. Her name was Sulaym. She tightly gripped the hand of her 10-year-old son, Anas. Unlike the others, her hands held no clinking coins, no exquisite fabrics, no baskets of choice dates. She was poor. Sulaym was leading the most precious thing she had left in this life, her child. Step by step, they pushed through the crowd until they stood before the messenger of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon him. Silence suddenly fell over the gathering. Sulaym raised her eyes and spoke the words that would forever change the destiny of her lineage. O messenger of Allah, all the people of the Ansar, be it man or woman, have given you a gift. I cannot gift you anything but my son. Take him. He will serve you however you wish, and make a supplication for him. In that very moment, the fate of the 10-year-old boy was sealed. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, looked at the child. In his gaze, there was not a shadow of superiority or condescension. He drew close and gently kissed Anas between the eyes. This gesture, filled with warmth and mercy, was forever imprinted in the boy's memory. The kiss was followed by a prayer. O Allah, increase his wealth and his children, bless him in what you give him, and admit him into paradise. The words rang out like the seal of destiny. Anas stayed. Childhood games and amusements were replaced by an entirely different reality. He became a servant in the house of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. This house was not distinguished by luxury. Simple clay walls, a woven mat on the floor, meager utensils, but it was precisely here, in this ascetic setting, that history was being forged. Anas turned into the invisible witness of monumental events. He brought water for ablution, ran errands, and observed every movement, every word, every deed. The boy found himself at the very epicenter of a nascent empire. He saw how the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, received revelations, how he dispensed justice, how he interacted with his wives and companions. For 10 years, Anas was right there by his side. 10 years of continuous service, about which he would later say words that stagger the imagination. I served the prophet for 10 years, and not once did he ever strike me, rebuke me for anything, scold me, or even cast a harsh glance at me. 10 years of absolute patience and gentleness from the one who carried the heavy burden of prophethood on his shoulders. 10 years that transformed a simple boy from Medina into one of the principal guardians of the Sunnah. Chapter 2. In the Shadow of the Messenger. Life in the house of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was nothing like a carefree childhood. Anas's days began long before dawn and ended deep into the night. The boy became a silent shadow, catching every desire of his patron. He would bring a jug of water for the morning ablution while the city still slept, serve modest meals, often consisting only of dates and water, and run small errands in the noisy markets of Medina. In this daily bustle lay a profound meaning. Anas witnessed the genuine, everyday life of the man whom thousands followed. He was amazed not by the power of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, but by his incredible simplicity. Once, in the exhausting midday heat, when the scorching air forced even the hardiest animals to seek shade, Anas witnessed a scene that shook him to his core. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had fallen asleep on a coarse mat that left deep imprints on his skin. He was sweating profusely from the heat. At that moment, Anas's mother, Sulaym, quietly slipped into the room. In her hands, she clutched a small glass vessel. With bated breath, trying not to wake the sleeper, she began to carefully collect the drops of sweat glistening on his face. Suddenly, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, opened his eyes. Sulaym flinched. "What are you doing?" he asked, displaying neither anger nor irritation. The woman's answer was steeped in absolute devotion. "We use your sweat as a fragrance. It is the most beautiful scent of all." Anas, watching this from the corner of the room, remembered this moment forever. He understood that even the mere physical presence of the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, was a profound blessing for them. Years passed. The boy was turning into a young man, and his duties became increasingly responsible. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, trusted him with tasks that even the closest companions knew nothing about. Anas became a keeper of secrets. He listened to conversations upon which the fate of the young Islamic community depended, delivered secret messages, and was present during the resolution of the most complex issues. Natural curiosity often waged war against duty within him. Once the mother and the wives of the Prophet tried to extract the details of a certain matter from him. The temptation was great. Who wouldn't want to boast of their insider knowledge before the adults? But Anas remembered the very first instruction given to him by the messenger. "O my son, keep the secret and be a true believer." He pressed his lips tightly together. The secret remained unrevealed. From that day on, no one doubted. A word entrusted to Anas vanished as if dropped into a bottomless well. He grew up surrounded by revelations and miracles. Every word of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, every reaction to events, the slightest shift in his demeanor, the sharp mind of Anas absorbed it all. He saw how the messenger prayed, how he rejoiced in victories, and how he endured the bitterness of loss. This closeness forged a phenomenal memory in the young man. What was merely a fleeting moment for others became a piece of eternity for Anas, carefully stored in the treasury of his mind. He was destined to become one of the main voices carrying the words of the Prophet to future generations. But back then, in the heat-scorched Medina, he was simply Anas, a limitlessly devoted servant whose life belonged entirely to a great man. Chapter 3. Witness to Great Battles. Serving the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was not confined solely to the walls of his home in Medina. Anas came of age in an era when the young Muslim state was fighting for its very existence. He became not just an observer, but a participant in historic battles that forever altered the map of Arabia. For Anas, war was not merely the clash of swords and the cries of the wounded. It was a time when he stood shoulder to shoulder with the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, in the most dangerous moments of his life. His martial path began early. While still a child bound to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he found himself at Badr, the first major battle that determined the outcome of a years-long confrontation. He was not a warrior in the full sense of the word, but he was there, in the very heart of the events, running errands and watching the courage of the companions. Badr became his first lesson in resilience and faith in victory, even when the enemy had vastly superior numbers. Badr was followed by other trials. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which became a triumph of the Prophet's diplomacy, peace and blessings be upon him, where Anas saw the bitter disappointment of some and the profound wisdom of the leader. He performed the Umrah with him, the lesser pilgrimage that became a symbol of return to sacred Mecca. He was also a witness to the great Hajj, the farewell pilgrimage of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Then came the conquest of Mecca. The city that had expelled them many years ago fell without bloodshed. Anas marched in the ranks of the victorious army, yet there was no room for vengeance in this triumph. He saw how the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, forgave his longtime enemies, demonstrating unprecedented magnanimity. It was a lesson in mercy that Anas memorized for the rest of his life. Next came Khaybar, Hunain, and Taif. In total, he took part in 8 military campaigns. Through 8 campaigns, he endured the hardships of expeditionary life, the scorching desert sun, the freezing night cold, the thirst, and the constant danger. He became one of the most accurate archers. His arrows always found their mark. Yet his greatest weapon remained his memory. Under the harsh conditions of these campaigns, he continued to record every instruction, every decision, and every prayer of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. It was during these campaigns that Anas observed how the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, shared meager rations with his warriors, how he personally bandaged wounds, how he cheered on the exhausted. He once transmitted a hadith that vividly demonstrated the Prophet's attitude toward luxury and ostentation. During one expedition, the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, rode on an old, worn-out saddle covered with a cheap piece of frayed cloth. He did not seek to stand out from the rest, nor did he demand special conditions. At that moment, he uttered a prayer that Anas preserved forever for his descendants. O Allah, make this a Hajj in which there is no showing off or desire for reputation. These war-torn years tempered Anas's character. He transformed from a servant boy into a seasoned man forged in the crucible of trials. But despite the clatter of weapons and the dust of battles, his heart forever retained that gentleness and devotion instilled in him by the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. He survived these battles not only to witness the victory of Islam, but to become one of the primary links in the chain of knowledge passing from the Prophet to his community. Chapter 4. Half of the Knowledge. The era when the voice of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, echoed directly in mosques and city squares, was irrevocably gone. He had passed away. The orphan community was left alone to face a vast world full of new challenges and complex questions. In this new reality, the words of the Messenger of Allah acquired the weight of gold. They became the law, the guiding compass, the light in the darkness. And so, the eyes of the Muslims turned to those few who had been by his side until the very end. Anas ibn Malik proved to be one of the most vital guardians of this legacy. That very boy who had collected the Prophet's sweat in a glass vessel now carried an ocean of wisdom within him. He became a living bridge between the past and the future. People traveled to him from all corners of the rapidly expanding caliphate. Whenever disputes flared up among scholars regarding the authenticity or interpretation of a particular statement, there was only one solution. Let us go to the one who heard it from the messenger of the Lord himself. Peace and blessings be upon him, they would say, and those words unfailingly led them to the threshold of Anas's home. He didn't just remember, he lived through these memories. Every word he transmitted was steeped in love and a deep understanding of the context. He narrated an astounding number of hadiths, around 2,286. By this measure, he was surpassed by only 2 other companions, making him the 3rd most prolific narrator in the history of Islam. It was a colossal endeavor. His memory retained thousands of details, intonations, gestures, and the exact circumstances under which a particular phrase was spoken. Anas understood the fragility of human memory and the importance of cementing knowledge for future generations. He didn't merely recount stories. He urged his students and children to engage in meticulous work. O children, secure knowledge by writing it down alongside the Book of Allah, he repeated tirelessly. He insisted on cross-referencing memories, thoroughly analyzing them, and linking them to the Quranic text. Anas became not just a storyteller, but one of the founding fathers of the methodology for preserving Islamic tradition. His authority was absolute. When Anas ibn Malik uttered, "I heard the Messenger of Allah say," all arguments ceased. Students hung on to his every word, recording every detail. He passed down knowledge about the rules of ablution and the nuances of prayer, about societal norms and the majesty of faith. Through him, Muslims learned about many intimate moments from the life of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. When time took its toll and Anas's earthly journey came to an end, a tremendous sense of loss shook the community. The words of Qatada, relayed from Maruk on the day of his death, sounded like an epitaph for an entire epoch. Today, half of the knowledge is gone, and there was no exaggeration in those words. With Anas's departure, the living thread that connected them to the daily life of the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, was severed. The man who had breathed the air of prophethood for 10 years and absorbed the wisdom that illuminated the path for millions had finally passed on. Chapter 5. Fruits of the Blessing. The prayer of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, spoken over a 10-year-old boy in dusty Medina, did not vanish into thin air. The words, "O Allah, increase his wealth and his children, bless him in what you give him, and admit him into paradise," sprouted through the decades, bearing incredible fruits. The life of Anas ibn Malik became a living testament to the power of prophetic blessing, capturing the imagination of both his contemporaries and descendants. Anas was no hermit. He embraced the gifts of the Almighty to the fullest. His family expanded to staggering proportions, growing into a veritable clan. He became the father of 80 sons and 2 daughters, among whom were Hafsa and Amr. By the end of his extraordinarily long life, the number of his direct descendants, children and grandchildren, numbered between 100 and 120, according to various accounts. He himself would say, "I have buried 120 of my own children, not counting my grandchildren." In these words echoes the bitterness of loss inevitable on such a long journey, but also the testament of a massive, vibrant life bestowed upon him from above. The blessing touched not only his lineage, but also his wealth. Anas never knew poverty. His orchards bore fruit with unbelievable generosity. Contemporaries noted with sheer amazement that his land yielded a harvest twice a year, whereas others' lands yielded only once. Anas himself admitted, "My land gives fruit twice." It was a visible, tangible miracle, a constant reminder of that kiss between the eyes and the prayer of the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him. But Anas's true wealth remained his closeness to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. For subsequent generations of Muslims, he was not just a wealthy, many-childrened elder, he was a living relic. People sought to meet him not for his riches, but for the light he carried within him. A story is told of a man named Thabit who once came to visit him. This visit turned into a reverent ritual of worshiping the memory of the messenger. Thabit, holding his breath, asked, "Have your eyes seen the Prophet? Peace and blessings be upon him?" And when Anas answered affirmatively, Thabit kissed his eyes. He kissed his feet upon learning that they had walked on the errands of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. He kissed his hands when Anas confirmed that it was with these very hands he had poured water for the ablution of the best of men. In response to this profound awe, Anas, filled with the wisdom of his long years, gave Thabit an instruction. "O young man, perform your ablution perfectly, and your life will be prolonged. Spread the greeting of peace, and your good deeds will increase. Read the Quran abundantly, and on the day of judgment you will be resurrected alongside me like 2 fingers, like the index and middle fingers." Anas ibn Malik outlived many of his fellow companions. Having relocated to Basra, he continued to teach the people, transmit hadiths, and serve as a living bridge to the era of revelation. He lived for more than a century, 103, 107, or even 110 years, according to different records. He witnessed how the world changed, how the borders of the caliphate expanded, how rulers came and went, and how empires fell. But in his heart, the Medina of his youth lived on unchanged, along with the quiet voice of the man whose secrets he kept until the very end. Chapter 6. The Last Witness. Time ruthlessly erased the traces of a grand epic. One after another, the companions passed away. Those who remembered the voice of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who stood in the same ranks with him at Badr, and who entered the conquered Mecca by his side. Their numbers dwindled, and with each departure, the living light of memory faded, giving way to written lines. Anas ibn Malik remained one of the last beacons of this dimming light. He had moved from his beloved Medina to Basra, a noisy, sprawling city that had become one of the hubs of the new Islamic world. Here, far from the places of his youth, he continued to fulfill his mission. Anas became an undeniable authority, teaching the people the Quran and the Sunnah. Disciples gathered around him, among them the brilliant minds of the next generation, such as Hassan al-Basri and Ibn Sirin. They eagerly drank in every word of the elder, fully aware that living history sat before them. But the final years of Anas's life were not serene. He lived to see a time of turmoil and cruelty. Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, a governor whose very name inspired terror, seized power in Iraq. His reign was marked by ruthlessness and tyranny. Anas, raised in the spirit of mercy and justice of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, could not stay silent. Despite his advanced age, he openly spoke out against Hajjaj's brutality. This conflict became a heavy ordeal for the elder. Accustomed to gentleness and respect, he now had to face the insolence and threats of an arrogant ruler. The years took their toll. Anas grew weaker. That very boy whose face had once been touched by the lips of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had turned into a deeply aged man. Disputes about the exact date of his death continue to this day. The 90th, 92nd, or 93rd year after the Hijrah, historians remain divided. They also differ in estimating his lifespan, 103, 107, or 110 years. But these numbers pale in comparison to the main fact. His departure was a colossal loss. Death found him on the outskirts of Basra, in an area some sources call Taif. When Anas ibn Malik drew his last breath, an entire era departed with him. The final door leading into the house of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was closed. The voice that could say, "I saw this with my own eyes, I heard this with my own ears," fell silent. Hundreds of people escorted him on his final journey. They were burying not just a centenarian, they were bidding farewell to the living embodiment of the Sunnah. And although Anas's body was committed to the earth, his legacy remained immortal. The 2,286 hadiths, carefully preserved in his memory, are forever woven into the fabric of the Islamic faith. The servant boy from Medina became a grand teacher for millions of Muslims, and his life, an astonishing story of devotion, carried through an entire century.